All right, everybody, it is Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight we're going to talk about something that is obviously all over the place, given shootings that have taken places in synagogues, taken place in New Zealand, information we found out about another white nationalist burning down the house, so to speak, trying to burn down another holy place for Muslims out in California. This is a propagated problem. This is a problem that is going to continue happening. It's going to continue happening, and we're going to try and solve it at the rate of racism, at white nationalism. This is the approach that we're going to try and take. And the sorry part of this is that white nationalism, as awful as it is, and as bad as white privilege is, and as bad as the superiority that has come with being white in America, for example, has been, the root cause of why these poor white people, many of these people are very poor white people, uneducated, many of them, completely despondent and hating life, don't see any way out, just as trapped as the next person, just as absolutely crushed by the world around them as others are. Now, mind you, they have privilege. Mind you, they have these other things. But to them, when their tooth falls out and they can't get to a dentist, they're not worried about privilege. They're worried about their tooth. And I think it would be wise for us in this movement and around the country, as we're faced with radicalism, radical white nationalism, fueled by guns, fueled by all kinds of anger and distrust and rage at losing place and prominence in society, whatever the cause, whatever people find in white nationalism that they don't find in other things. The rise and fall of the Third Reich, the rise and fall of Benito Mussolini and others who have taken these similar tactics. This has been repeated throughout history. And almost without flaw, people either go to war and kill somebody, which the United States has proven time and time again it's willing to do against people of black and brown color and who are not Judeo-Christians typically. But they have taken the extra step of policing the globe and infiltrating everywhere with the same kind of jackbooted thug mindset. This is not going away anytime soon, unfortunately. It's not. And I fear that the reason why people that are low down, the working class white people, are drawn to this reckless, repulsive way of life stems not only from what is perceived as a loss of stature, because many of these people have never, folks, they've never had a pot to piss in. They haven't been able to get their medical needs taken care of. They haven't gotten their education taken care of. They don't have babysitting. They don't have any of the things that we talk about wanting to give all of the 99%. That would include them. We as progressives want to provide them with all kinds of things that would help them. But they can't see that because they've been indoctrinated. And the reason why the indoctrination works is the same reason it works in every other place it's ever worked. I want you to think about something. Every single time you have seen something like nationalism crop up, and you've seen especially a race-based nationalism prop up, a master race of some variety pop up, almost without fail, there has been some form of economic destruction. Look at Germany. It was absolutely decimated. Anywhere there is massive pain and suffering and what appears to be no way out, no more work in the mailroom and work your way up to CEO kind of opportunities available. when you don't see any way out, and you look at your wife and you look at your kids and they think you're a failure, and everyone thinks you're a failure, you start looking for somewhere where they don't call you a failure. You start looking for somewhere where they don't start calling you horrible names, and you don't feel less about yourself. And because you feel so bad, you end up finding people that feel the same way, and they find a scapegoat. They find someone else to blame for their problems. They're just as ignorant, misguided, and yes, evil as anyone else. But their problem doesn't start. You look around, and sure, there are pockets of ignorance everywhere we go. Pockets of ignorance everywhere we go. There's no question about it. But overall, people genuinely, when things are good, when people are getting taken care of, when their teeth are fixed, when they're not worried about getting laid off at the mill, when they're not wondering how they're going to get by in life, when they're not wondering how they're going to afford car payments and car repairs, and they're like have some breathing room. They don't want to go hang out with the boys and be proud boys and be white nationalists. They don't want to do that. Yeah, there's always a core of idiots. There's a core of idiots in Iran. For those of you who don't think Iran's a bad place, I'm sure there's good people everywhere, right? But there's that core bad people everywhere. And they gain and lose followers depending upon the state of the nation. They gain and lose followers based on the state of the nation. And when I see people decrying racism and decrying white nationalism, I say, yes, you should definitely decry it. Racism is an unspeakable horror to the people that is perpetrated on. White nationalism and nationalism as a whole tends to isolate and create enemies. It's bad. I'm sure there's something to being a little bit nationalistic, a little bit proud of your domain, whatever, and trying to make it the best you can be. But the flip side to that is where it's gone awry. Folks, people are suffering in this fucking country. If you've ever taken a drive through rural white America, where these folks have wood floors still, their feet are dirty, their belly's sticking out, they've been drinking Natty Boh. I mean, all the cliches and caricatures that you can think of. They got their calendar ginned up with every hunting day on it. Their entire life is founded on this idea. And that idea is slipping away from them. I don't have a whole lot in common with them. It's hard for me sometimes to empathize. It's hard for me to look at these things and say, they're human beings too. How do we fix this? You know, Bernie Sanders goes on Fox News and there's somebody out there yelling and moaning that, hey, a white nationalist was elected president. Bernie, stop going over to Fox News. The day we leave these people behind, the day we forget about them, the day we stop trying to show them another way, the day we stop taking care of the 99%, we start taking care of the 45%, is the day that we really lose. Now, I'm here to tell you, whenever I go to rural America, and I live in rural America, I come from urban America, I come from Washington, D.C., where it was a melting pot. But whenever I go to rural America and really trek out beyond my own house, I'm always amazed by what looks like a decade-old haircut. Haircuts from 10, 12, 15 years ago. People look like they're weathered, they're worn. Their faces look weathered and worn. Their teeth look weathered and worn. Their fingers and hands look weathered and worn. They have a different look on their face. Their face has a different affect. They lead a tough life. Even when it's good, it's tough. And it's simple. And they are led astray when things are going wrong. They trust few. And when they're here, something that they can latch on to. This is not all. We got to be careful about painting with broad strokes. But there's enough pain and suffering in white America, regardless, folks, and this is the thing, regardless of how much pain and suffering is going on in people that are suffering even more than them. Every person has their threshold. Pain feels different to each person in its own way. And the pain they're feeling is no less pain, even if it's founded in insanity. But it's pain. And there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. Now, can you convince the hardcore of the bunch to change? Probably not. But I've experienced many, many, many changes from people. I was once a right-winger long ago. I know what goes on in their heads. Not necessarily from the white nationalist part so much, but I do understand the concept of conservatism. I've never owned a gun, so I missed out on that joy. But I've been around it, and they're angry. But they've been angry. They're angry because they feel that the things that matter to them are no longer mattering. And it's not just that they get to be head and shoulders above someone else. This may sound like I'm making an apology for them. I assure you I'm not. There's no way to make an apology for these things. But if you understand what Bernie Sanders' strategy has been, Bernie has gone into these places because he wants to give them an opportunity to see a different alternative. He wants them to see an alternative, something other than. He wants to give them somewhere to go. And I think to myself, I don't know how many of you all remember this, but going back to 2015, do you all remember the major shooting that happened in France? And then the major shooting that happened later on in Vegas? I think a lot of people have forgotten about these things, but going back to the Paris shootings, I mean, it happened at a very strange time. I'm not talking false flags. I want to be real clear here so you understand. But tragedy always happens. We didn't just suddenly grow white nationalists. They've been in our midst for a long time. A very, very long time. And, I think to myself, what is it that maybe makes people, not realize that this isn't like some new phenomenon? The reason why this has been brewing is the same reason it's been brewing in Europe. You see the fight over Brexit. And they try and claim it's all about these right-wing nationalists. But there's another group of people that understands the economic system and understands how neoliberalism has destroyed people's lives. Now, if you're paying attention to how neoliberalism affects your life, privatization, mass incarceration, scapegoats, major benefits to quote-unquote free markets and minor help to the people, if at all. The constant appearance of a need to cut spending, to reduce deficits, to reduce debt, to constantly slow down spending on the people, to tighten it up. You look at the yellow vests out in France fighting back. Each one of these things stems from austerity and stems from economic exclusion. How many of you all have witnessed, when talking to someone, particularly on the right, even the center right, even the Democrats who are right-wing, and you talk to them about how we can fix the student debt problem, and the first thought they have is, well, I had to pay for mine, or ain't nobody give me nothing. First thought. And you know what? These neoliberal candidates, they're going to carve it up. They're going to say, well, only these people over here deserve those benefits. We're going to eliminate these people over here. Now, one may have suffered more than the others, and there's no question about that. But if your goal is to stop white nationalism and stop violence and stop the pain and suffering of minorities and making people whole, you don't do that by starting at white nationalism as if it in and of itself is the reason why white nationalism exists. White nationalism is an outcome of a lot of stupid shit that could have easily been done differently, but has been fomented and allowed to grow. It's easy to look at Fox News because Fox News is so vapid and vacuous. It's like, of course those sons of bitches are what's to blame. But I want you to take a look at how identity politics, in particular with neoliberalism, has created so many enemies. I mean, we had people, indigenous people, yelling and whatnot at African American people for fighting for reparations. Instead of understanding, it's not the African American people that are taking away reparations for indigenous people. It's up there. They can make a choice to solve both of them. Just like we don't need to pick winners and losers here. If you want to make things right, and you want to put an end to this stuff right here, and you want to make it so that this isn't the focus of the entire campaign, which means that it will wipe out conversations about a Green New Deal. It'll wipe out conversations about health care. It'll wipe out these other things because it becomes all-encompassing. And it's not an accident that it becomes that way. The shift to talking about white nationalism and the violence that comes with it starts way, way, way back, way, way, way before we got to this election. But because we're going into an election and it serves political needs, and it can be used against Donald Trump, it will be leveraged in a way that is not helpful to the broader goals of bringing up all ships and really putting an end to the spigot that keeps filling up the white nationalists. By choking off their supply, by making it so that we are lifting all ships, by making sure we have a federal job guarantee, by ensuring everyone has a right to health care, by making our schools better, by taking away the excuses, because we give everyone a better way of life. That's how you stop white nationalism. Yelling at them and meeting them in the streets with face masks and ready to fight them and throw Molotovs at them and whatever isn't going to change it. It's just going to reinforce their need to go to war, their need to fight. It's going to retrench them, not extract them. It's going to make them double down. It's one of those weird things that I think we all find in our lives where when someone forces our hand at something without fixing the problem that caused us to go there to begin with, instead of saying, oh yeah, I see the error in my ways, you got it, man. Hey, I'm a new man, I'm ready to change. No. They see you as the demon. They see you as the one causing pain in their lives. And so they write these manifestos. They go out there and they create these situations where they go and blow up the next synagogue. I mean, we're not talking about, some random act here. I mean, these are as predictable as can be. I'm shocked we haven't seen more of them. But we haven't, thank God. But don't think for a minute that if we ignore the plight of the 99%, not the 49%, not the 51%, but the 99%, if we forget the needs of the 99%, then we are just going to be in perpetual war. And this will overcome everything we want to talk about, including the environment. The environment is so much more abstract. It's so hard to get your head wrapped around. But it is so easy to lock in to, he doesn't like me. He wants to harm me. He wants to this. He wants to. And why do they want that? Because they are fucked in the head. Austerity breeds hatred. Austerity breeds discontent. And neoliberalism demands a scapegoat. And damn it, if they're not going to hate the Mexicans for possibly taking their jobs, hate all immigrants for taking their jobs, hate all black people because they might take their wives, hate this person, hate that person, hate the other person. All these things are wrought off by some deep-seated insecurity. There's some things we can't do anything about. But this is one that we really can do something about. When you look at a federal job guarantee, that's not just for African Americans. That's not just for indigenous people. That's not just for the people that made under $100,000 a year. That's for every single American that needs and wants a job. It doesn't matter who comes into this country now. Sure, it'll matter to some people. But for others who now have a guaranteed job, it'll change things dramatically. Now you're dealing with a manageable group of nut jobs, people that are genuinely bad people, got to screw loose and need to be taken care of. But when it comes down to the overarching issue of white nationalism, neoliberalism breeds white nationalism. Neoliberalism prides itself and thrives off of these demonizations. You know that whole saying of hate the sin, not the sinner? Well, in this particular case, it's real easy to just hate them all because they do things that are worth hatred. Because who the hell wants to support anyone that is a racist, violent, sick white supremacist? No one. And yet, most of them are just joiners. Most of them are suffering. Most of them have been displaced. And the economic narrative have never been more important. Without satisfying the causes of white nationalism, you're just going to get more white nationalism. And then we all miss the New Deal. There is no New Deal because we'll be so distracted fighting white nationalism that in and of itself is pure, unadulterated evil and hatred. But it's like beating up the child who shot the spitball, but not realizing there was someone behind them that did it to him first, or whatever. It's always attacking the second, third, fourth, fifth item, and they never want to go to the root cause. That root cause is creating so many problems for us. I don't think it's going away, because I don't think we can get past the point of saying it is okay to hate white nationalism. It is okay to stand firmly against racism. But it is not okay to pretend that it came about because everybody's just such great people and that we as a nation have always taken care of our own. Austerity creates crime in the streets. It creates all sorts of drug addictions. It creates all sorts of hopelessness, which manifests itself in a ton of different ways. Moms dropping their babies off in dumpsters. Dads killing their entire families. People hanging themselves. And yes, terrorism, white nationalism. Folks, austerity makes everything hateful, makes everything razor's edge. Every decision is like balancing life and death because you don't have any bandwidth. You got no money, you got no survival abilities. Now, somebody, because I know it always happens, will say, another white guy talking about an economic situation when we're talking about racism. And that's a shame. Because what we're talking about is a cure to these problems. The same thing that cures the ills for Group A also cures the ills for Group B. People are busy defending what they feel is theirs. And it's wrong, because it doesn't have to be that way. And it's up to progressives to make a choice. Do you want to really fix it at its root? Or do you just want to join in the street fight? Because I'm sick and tired of racism. I want it to go away. I want it to die forever. I hate white nationalism. I want it to go away forever. But I hate austerity more than anything in the world. And economic illiteracy breeds austerity, which breeds white nationalism and racism, you name it. Feel free to fight with me on this. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong. But I assure you, what do you think happens with all those folks when they have free health care after they complain about it because that's what they have to do to be part of their society? Free college for the kids that are growing up in that environment, suddenly having a choice to go to schools. I mean, there's a lot here. And we can make it good for all Americans, all people, and take the pressure off of immigrants. Get rid of the xenophobia. But when a guy walks in the door of a synagogue with one of these freaking rifles, the AR-15, and just unloads on them, writes a manifesto laughing but saying, hey man, I would die 1,000 deaths. I'd sacrifice being with my kids. I'd sacrifice having a wife. I'd sacrifice this. I'd sacrifice that. All to defend our way of life. Because the Jews is what he says. They own the banking system. They own this. They own that. The debt. The lies, the economic lies that are told are as evil as any other lie you'll ever hear. And they've caused more people to do more stupid things, say more stupid things, believe more stupid things, act on stupid things than you will ever know. The truth, without solving the economic problem, white nationalism will pretend to be the cure for all those black people and all those indigenous people and all those ne'er-do-good Jews and this and that. It will serve as seeds and watering and fertilizer to continue to grow and grow and grow until we have an all-out civil war once again in the United States. And that's not what I want. I want all of us healthy, leading lives of abundance, being able to self-determine who and what we are without having to bond with a gang in order to feel some sort of value. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Perhaps this is just something that's in my head. Perhaps it's just something that I'm thinking that has no merit. I don't believe that for a second. But perhaps I don't see people rushing to fix the economic narrative. But I do see people rushing to put their masks on and run in the street. And I don't know how to fix that narrative. I don't know how to make people understand what the cures are. And as long as people keep putting Band-Aids on heart attacks, putting aspirin between their knees to solve for pregnancy, until we stop allowing the left to mislead people as much as the right misleads their people, until we stop buying these narratives and we stay focused on the cure, you can pretty much expect more of this. And that's a shame. I wish there was a happy ending to this story. But I think people will skip the concept of fixing the economic system, and they'll just focus on, imperialistic, masochistic, chauvinistic, racist, homophobic, xenophobic, and they won't focus on the fears that drive each of those behaviors. Because it's too cool to be left. Why focus on fixing it when you can yell about it? It's bad. Of course it's bad. Now what? What's your solution? You don't have one. You're just going to yell at them. Wow. Whoo! That works with my kids every time. The economic narrative is the only way to solve this. And you shrink their population by shrinking what brought them to the table to begin with. And it's not just because they're white. That's the thing. That's the tough part. I bet you'd be shocked at some of the people that end up in that mess. I bet you'd be shocked. I know every time I run into somebody that says something racist, it makes me go, God. Every single time I do it, it makes me crazy. I can't stand being around racists. It's hard. I hate hearing their small world. I hate hearing their small views. I hate hearing all that stuff. And yet I know, in order to fix that, shaming the living shit out of them and not recognizing what started this and how they continue to perpetuate it to keep us completely and utterly useless to fight back. It's a work of art by the neoliberal class. They have mastered the art of creating scapegoats. They have mastered the art of getting the left to chase its tail and to get them off their game. And to believe, of all things, that they're absolutely in the right because they can't do more. But instead, the economic narrative that's what would have fixed Germany. We would have had no World War II. I'm telling you right now, World War II would have never happened. It could have been avoided 100%. Adolf Hitler could have never come to power. You can thank the Treaty of Versailles for that. You can thank the Treaty of Versailles for the austerity and the pain and suffering that it brought on the German people to make them even susceptible to that. Yeah, and they do feel very, very embarrassed. Because the good Germans turned their back on everything because they were completely swept up in this. But the truth is that it would have never come to be. Never come to be. Sometime do some research on what Reconstruction in the United States was like. And start thinking about when we try to fix a problem, do we do a good job of fixing the problem? Or is our first go-to move to try and exact a price, to try to punish and humiliate groups? You have to ask yourself that question. I'm not going to answer it for you. I think the answer is pretty obvious. But I want you to look every step along the way and think about how much the Reconstruction period did to facilitate Jim Crow and all the other things that came down afterwards, all the other pain and suffering. I want you to think about what happened in Germany, and I want you to think about austerity, and I want you to think about what breeds these things. And if your goal is to cure it and cure it quick, may I suggest that you don't do only outcries and decrying the evils of racism and white nationalism, which we've established, I hope, as pretty fucking evil. The Nazis were pretty fucking evil. But that virus couldn't take form without austerity. And I want you to think about that when next time you skip past an economic post, next time you're just hanging out and wanting to be cool with the kids, and so you ignore the economics because that's what people do. Next time you ignore the economics, I want you to think about the deaths that come from austerity and from this punitive lashing out. I want you to think about how many people end up dying as a result of that, versus trying to attack the root cause. It's not sexy. People don't like it. They like focusing on what's right here, right in their face. And what's right in their face is these ugly, nasty, mean-spirited, jackbooted thugs, these jackbooted thug police officers, jackbooted thug white nationalists, jackbooted thugs all over the place. That's what they see. But those people look like an asshole when they look in the mirror when things have been taken care of. And we eliminate their excuses. And people fade away quick, I'm telling you. Is it a perfect solution? No, we've got a million other pieces that have to go along with that. So I don't want anybody to think that the whole goal here was just economics. But it is the root. The root. You know, they say the love of money is the root of all evil. In this case, though, we're not talking about greedy people. We're talking about people that have been banged into submission and have accepted their lot in life as just low class, and they don't see any hope. You fix that problem, you fixed the white nationalist problem. Then we got to focus on guns. And then we got to focus on a million other things. But start there. Take the excuse away. And you will see great strides made. Anyway, I'm Steve Grumbine. Hopefully, if you agreed with this message, you'll let me know. If you disagree with this message, I'd love to talk to you about it. Because the truth is, I believe what I just said. And I feel very, very strongly, I can see over the course of history, every time this has happened, you can look back at the economics of the time. And you can look back at the austerity. And each time, you've got a situation of class warfare. You got a situation where people have been punished for actually speaking out. Then you got a situation where there's scapegoats. And we can fix this. Let's get a Green New Deal. Let's get a job guarantee. And let's start taking care of people so they stop looking in all the wrong places to find their cures. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a great day, everybody. I'm out.